It's a real pleasure to be here. And I want to start as well by thanking CART. The support that you're giving me to do this work is really just going to change the trajectory of the work that I'm able to do. And as you'll hear from what I'm about to talk about, I'm all about tracking trajectories. So I also want to say a word just in memory of Dr. Trojanowski, who's not someone that I personally know, but who's touched the lives of a lot of the people around me and is one of the giants whose shoulders I stand on. I work with people who've known him for decades, and all I've ever heard about him are just the most wonderful things, that he was a really kind person, a good scientist, and just a helpful colleague. So with that, I also maybe should say a little bit about my why, and maybe it should be obvious with my parents here as well. Alzheimer's disease is a very personal thing for me. When I was a postdoc, I wasn't studying Alzheimer's disease, but my grandmother started to show signs of dementia. And I can still remember a lot of the ways that it impacted her, it impacted my family, and I'll get a little too emotional if I talk on that too much, but it's something that I would really love to see the end of. So I'll tell you a bit about the work that I've been doing since I joined MGH in Harvard. And it really has to do, there we go. With pictures like this. And something that I learned from a lot of the work that I did previously is a lot of our understanding of diseases really comes down to what we can see, how we can interpret it, how we can look at it. Here are two MRI images. One taken on the left is a brain that has Alzheimer's disease, and the one on the right is a healthy brain. If you were to just take an MRI image and you were to stick it on a screen, they'd kind of look like a couple of indecipherable blobs. But if instead you took some of the computers that we have now and you start to make surfaces and you put lights on them, you can see a lot of really incredible differences in the brain that you weren't really able to see before. You can see this brain on the left is shriveled, it's shrunken, and a lot of the questions that we're able to ask about Alzheimer's disease really comes down to our ability to see these things. A lot of the ways we can monitor the effectiveness of treatments has to do with whether or not we can see what's happening. So, historically, there's been a lot of effort to improve the ways that we can look at the brain and look at what's happening, that we can look at people and see what's happening earlier and earlier and track how these changes are affecting them. You end up with archetypal sequences of changes, things like this, where people will say that something changes first, followed by another, followed by another. But what we end up seeing in people is, despite this kind of sequence of changes, there's still this substantial variability in the trajectory of dementia. And we don't have a great way of understanding why it is that, I'm going.
I'll do it for you.
Okay, thanks.
Just tell me when to change it.
So what we see is a great variability in the trajectory of Alzheimer's disease, and it becomes very difficult to try and understand when you're talking to a patient what is going to happen to them in the next year, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years. There are times when I'll receive a call from my parents and they'll say that one of their friends has recently been diagnosed with MCI and they don't know what that means. And they want to know, how should they plan the rest of their life? But their doctors are reluctant to tell them how many years they have of normal cognition. Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Do they need to start worrying about the next year? And the plot on the last slide really shows you one of the reasons that there's a lot of reluctance for doctors to tell a patient what's going to happen next is there's such a huge variability in what we see in people. And while there are a lot of new methods that are helping us understand what's happening in people while they're alive, historically, a lot of our information has come from people who've already passed. You'll see pictures like this, where they'll try to take images of a human brain from a bunch of different people, and they'll try to come up with a timeline or some kind of staging and say, oh, well, there's a little bit here in stage 1, and then you can see more in stage 2 and stage 3, and then by the time you reach stage 6, there's just so much everywhere. So obviously a person will go along that kind of trajectory. Next slide. But the way that I think about this is it's really like trying to understand a sports game by looking at the final few seconds. And if you were to take these were just a few screenshots of ones I could find on YouTube, and you were trying to look at this and tell what game this was and how it was played and what was happening, you might think, okay, well, football's where a bunch of guys dress up and hug each other. Next slide. There are new methods that get developed that really let us observe living people. We can start watching the game, but they don't necessarily give us the resolution that we want to watch the full game. So you'll see snapshots over time. And if I take an image every 25 minutes from this game, you'll see, okay, there are a couple where they're actually playing football. But only 8% of the runtime of this football game involved people playing football. An average play, I read, was 4 seconds long. In the case of a person and their life, what percent of their life involves their brain degenerating? What's the time scale? What are the events that happen? And are the technologies that we have really giving us access to those events? Next slide. So, as you can imagine, these observations will strongly impact the hypotheses that we can develop and test. From those images, you'll see things like, okay, there are 22 people on a green field, there's 1 ball, there's a giant fan for some reason. And based on these observations, you can see at the end of the game, it stops. A bunch of people flood the field. So you might come up with this hypothesis that the way we need to treat Alzheimer's disease, the way we need to stop a football game, is by flooding the field with a bunch of people. And it can be really hard if we don't have good methods to observe what's going on, to understand what it is we actually want to treat, or whether the treatments we have are effective. Next slide. So from these, we'll often try to make mouse models that are based on what we see and study. So here we recreated what we saw. Is this mouse also going to get brain damage? Well, next slide. We have this new set of methodology over the past few years, ranging from things like amyloid PET and tau PET, different types of MRIs, and now some really wonderful new blood tests that came out in the last year that are changing the way that we understand this disease. They're changing our ability to classify these diseases, how we perceive it. Some of the perception that people will often have is that neurodegenerative diseases have a debilitating outcome in the vast majority of cases, but what we're seeing is that's not true. That they're really a spectrum of conditions with heterogeneous prognoses, including many that are benign.